Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to give you my lists of my most liked movies of the year and most disliked movies of the year. Now, you notice I said favorite and least favorite movies. That's because some of these movies are on equal par with each other in terms of how good or how bad they are. So it was really hard to say which one was better than any other in the category of movies I liked, and which one was any worse than another in the category of movies that I didn't like, at least for me. So they're not in any particular order. These are just 10 movies that were my least favorite that I saw this year, and 10 movies that were my favorite movies that I saw this year. So let's start with the negative. That way we can end the video on a high note. My least favorite movies of the year are as follows. I'm going to start with the big one that I know a lot of people will agree with me was a horrible movie, and that was Madam Web. I did a standalone review video for this movie, so if you want to know what I thought about it in depth, you can check that out on the channel. But it was just bad. There was a lot of dumb in it. You know, it was just full of dumb. And, you know, they teased things that they didn't deliver on, both in the marketing and in the film itself. And so it was just awful. They had Sydney Sweeney pretending to be a 17-year-old. It was just a bad movie. And you can check out my review if you want to know more about why I say that. The next movie on my least favorite movies of the year list is The Exorcism with Russell Crowe. Now, Russell Crowe made two back-to-back exorcism-related movies. And the first one that he made I thought was okay, The Pope's Exorcist. It was a little weird at the end, but I liked that movie. The Exorcism, however, is just not a good movie. He's playing a guy who's playing a guy that does exorcisms.
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
And the movie is haunted. And in fact, I can't even remember the plot. It was such a bad movie and just not memorable at all. I can't even remember what took place in it. It just wasn't a good movie. The premise was horrible, and it didn't have anything in it that was good at all. Just a bad movie. Next movie on my list of least favorite films of 2024 was The Crow. Now, as I said in my standalone review for this video, I was never a huge diehard fan of the original Crow movies, nor did I ever read the comics. So this for me wasn't a situation where I was like, oh, it wasn't faithful to the source material, or the other movie was better, you know, or any of that, or it was too much of a departure from the original movie. None of that came into it for me. It just wasn't good. They didn't spend enough time showing us, you know, how he becomes the Crow. They kind of gave it short shrift. And then he just goes on like a massive killing spree. And the action was good. The killing spree part was good. But I just didn't think that there was any substance to it. They didn't really give it any emotional heft, I didn't think, or any believable setup. So I just didn't like it. It just wasn't a good movie. The next movie on my list of my least favorite movies of the year was Smile 2. Now, I really did like Smile, the original Smile film. I thought it was unique. And I thought it had an A to B to C, you know, plot, and ended well, even though the ending is kind of open-ended. I thought it was great. It wasn't something where you said, gee, they didn't really explain anything, or, you know, the ending was bad because it leaves you hanging. It didn't. It was open-ended, but it didn't leave you hanging. So I really liked that movie. Smile 2, I didn't like. And it isn't because it does any of the things I said the first one didn't. But it just, I don't know, it focused on a character who was a famous person in the story, and I thought that was a bad choice. Also, it seemed like the haunting worked differently in the sequel than it worked in the first one. I didn't remember it working the way it works in the second one in the first one, so I thought they kind of like retconned the story. And, you know, don't get me wrong, it had creepy moments, but like it seemed like they were making stuff up as they were going and not really staying true to the source material from the original film. It didn't resonate with me. I just didn't like it. I thought it was a bad movie. They shouldn't have made it. They should have left well enough alone with Smile 1. Anyway, the next movie on my least favorite movies list is A Quiet Place Day One. I did a quick review video for this one because there wasn't a lot to say about it. Lupita Nyong'o is excellent in everything, so she's good in this. But, I thought that the movie spent way too little time in the before world. Like it opens and it's only a few minutes before they're under siege by the aliens, and at that point it's not day one anymore, right? It's the same as the other two movies. They're in the full blown invasion phase. So I didn't see why they fashioned it as day one and marketed it that way. Also, there's just some stuff in it that doesn't make any sense, including a cat that never makes noise. So it just didn't do it for me. It wasn't a good film. It was more rehashed than anything else, so I didn't like it, despite liking Lupita Nyong'o. The next movie on my list of least favorite movies of 2024 is Craven. So, Sony's taken a lot of flack for these Spider-Man universe films that they made without Spider-Man in them. We already talked about Madam Web, which of course is one of those. Craven is better than Madam Web. It didn't have as much dumb in it, but I didn't like that they made him a good guy. And who knows, in a sequel, if they were to make one, which they're not going to, they might later show him make a heel turn, which would be consistent with the character in the comics, which is a bombastic, insane, larger than life, mustache twirling villain. So to me, it was like, why did they use this IP to make this movie? They didn't adhere to the IP at all. And that was a disappointment to me. It does have good action, but what it didn't have is any sort of depiction of how Craven developed his abilities. Like, in other words, he gets wounded, he gets dosed with this kind of super serum thing, along with some lion's blood that mixes in with his own. And the next thing you know, he's super hunter guy. It never shows him realizing he has these abilities and honing them and testing them out. He's automatically super hunter dude and just starts tracking people down. So it was an origin story movie without an origin story. So I didn't care for it. Russell Crowe is good in it, interestingly, but the rest of it I just didn't care for. It's not a good movie. That's just all there is to it. The next film on my least favorite films of 2024 list is Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Now, this is a movie that I did a standalone review video for, and I didn't like it because it was a big letdown. Michael Keaton is iconic, and this is one of his best characters, but I really felt like he took a back seat in this movie, that he was hardly in it for the star of the picture and for the character that everybody wanted to see. I also felt like it was all over the place. They had plots in this movie, on top of plots, and I just thought it was a disjointed mess. Winona Ryder's great in it, but I didn't care for this movie, and I didn't really like all the disjointed plots. Willem Dafoe is in it. He's good, but his plot is one of the plots that's kind of stupid. So this movie was a mess, and it just wasn't very good, and I was disappointed in it, and that's why it's on my least favorite movies of 2024 list. The next film on this same list is Joker 2, and there again, fine performances. Joaquin Phoenix did a great job, and I hate him, but he was great in Joker, the first one. He's really, really good in this, in playing this downtrodden Arthur character. So I really liked, that aspect of it. But in my standalone review, I said that I thought there were too many musical numbers, and that's odd for me because I like musicals. I'm a theater kid. But I thought there were too many musical numbers, that they could have dialed back on these fugue state-like moments that he goes into to have these songs. I didn't think they added to the narrative at a certain point. So I was disappointed with that. I also was disappointed with how terribly underused Lady Gaga was in this movie. She sings and dances the heck out of herself, but actually it's not so much her that's it's Harley Quinn that's underused. There was virtually no Harley Quinn in this movie. There's a character named Lee who is like a Joker sycophant, and Lady Gaga does an excellent job, but I never saw Harley Quinn in this movie, and that's what I really wanted to see. And so I was big time disappointed by this movie, unfortunately. The next movie on my least favorite movies of 2024 list is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Again, I did a standalone video review of this movie, and again, it's a movie that had too much going on, too many subplots, A plot, B plot, C plot, D plot, and so it was all over the place. One or two of those plots were thought-provoking and moving, but it was just an all over the place film, and in my mind, just didn't live up to the previous Ghostbuster film, which I thought was pretty good. The last movie on my list of least favorite films of 2024 is Under Paris. I did a quick review video for this. Essentially, it's Jaws in the Seine River in Paris with multiple sharks and a whole lot of dumb. Just dumb moment after dumb moment after dumb moment. And just not a good movie. I also collaborated with my friend Matt Cat over at BS Drunk Reviews and his lovely sister for discussion of this movie, and you can check that video out on his channel. I'll try to put a link in the description, but we had a good old time talking about just how bad this movie was, and it's pretty bad. So that's my list of my 10 least favorite movies of 2024. Let's get to my list of my 10 favorite movies of 2024. And first on the list is Deadpool and Wolverine. Again, I did a standalone review video for this movie, so you can check that out. But it boils down to Ryan Reynolds is a comedic genius, and he got such a great performance out of Hugh Jackman in this movie, who, is playing not only an aging version of Wolverine, but a less sort of serious version of Wolverine because he has to constantly put up with Deadpool's shtick, which is not something he had to do in the X-Men films or even his own standalone Wolverine films. There's not a lot of goofy stuff going on that Wolverine reacts to in those movies, but in this it's constant. And so it just thought it was really good. The comedic moments were, off the charts. So just a really good movie. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know if you saw it. So there you go. The next movie on my list of my favorite movies of 2024 is Late Night with the Devil. Now, this, of course, was a horror movie, and it's kind of what I would call a bottle film. It took place in one location in quote unquote real time. So it unfolds over the course of an evening of a television show, a late night television show. And there are some spooky possession-like, satanic moments, and you get to see how they react to it in a setting of a TV show, and the characters. And so I just really enjoyed it. It was spooky and crazy and just a lot of fun. I recommend it if you're looking for a good horror movie. Next on my list of favorite movies of the year was The Watchers. Once again, I did a standalone review video for this, so you can check that out on the channel. I tend to like M. Night Shyamalan movies to begin with, and this, of course, was his daughter's joint, but it really was good. The way the story unfolds and the way the mystery unfolds, and I thought that the ending was satisfying, that in the end, you learn what was going on, and it kind of gets left open-ended as to what's going to happen next, but I thought it was a well-done ending. I did have some questions about certain choices they made towards the end that didn't entirely make sense, but overall, I thought it was a good film. I really, really enjoyed it. Next on my list of favorite movies of 2024 is Alien Romulus. Now, again, I've never been a diehard fan of the Alien movies. I've seen them all. I've liked them all to one degree or another, but the last couple I thought were sort of overwrought, too high-minded, in terms of concept type movies. Whereas this one was a little more down to earth and a little more nitty-gritty and a little more action over cerebral stuff. And it's not that I don't like cerebral movies, but it has to be balanced. And I didn't think the previous couple of Alien films were. This one didn't have really any cerebral stuff, but I thought it was fine. It was all sort of action and spooky, and I just really enjoyed watching this movie as a horror experience. It was pretty good. The next movie on my list of favorite movies of 2024 is The Substance. This is a body horror film starring Demi Moore. And the story wasn't anything we haven't seen before. We've seen this story on like The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone and shows like that where someone has an issue with their appearance and they go to sort of crazy lengths to do something about their appearance, including, like dabbling in the occult or taking experimental, procedures or drugs or whatever, and things go badly. And, it's a cautionary tale. So we've seen this before, but I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed this take on the story. I enjoyed Demi Moore, who I thought was really vulnerable in this. She seemed to not shy away from showing what she really looks like as a 60-year-old woman, which is not, what she looked like when she was a 25-year-old woman. To drive home the point that people, especially women in this crazy world and in the industry that this character's in, which is the entertainment industry, have to worry about their appearance. And it would be easy to make a movie like this with an attractive star and not allow them to show their flaws because, you want the movie to be marketable and to draw audience based on the actress's looks. But they didn't do that here. They let her sort of show her age, and it worked in the story because it was a great contrast for the plot, in which there's a younger version of herself that comes about, and because of the use of the substance. And so the contrast was there. And because it was a body horror movie, it was gruesome at times and hard to watch at times, and I just enjoyed the crap out of that. So, and the ending was just like a real mind fuck, if you would. So I just really liked the substance. I would say check it out. Next movie on my list of most liked films of 2024 is Venom 3. Now, this again is one of those Sony Spider-Man universe movies without Spider-Man. But unlike Madam Web and Craven, this movie is a lot of fun. The first two were a lot of fun. And I don't normally like Myers in his movies, but I thought he was good in all three of these movies. He's good in the third one. And, just all the interplay between him and the Venom character is just funny and at times heartfelt. And, there's action and there's carnage, no pun intended. And so I found it really enjoyable. I realized that it's a departure from the comics because Venom's a bad guy. But for me, that didn't bother me because, again, I never really followed along all that closely with Venom and Carnage and all that stuff. So I don't really know the comic book side of it. So for me, I was just able to put that aside and watch it for what it was. And I just found it to be a very enjoyable sort of buddy comedy film with, action and a little bombacity. So I really liked it. Next movie on my list of films I liked in 2024 was Red One. Now, a lot of critics have panned this movie. They pick on The Rock because he plays the same character in every movie, they say, and they just didn't like this movie or whatever. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It had a heartfelt subplot that paid off in the end. There's some shenanigans with the Krampus character in the movie, and it was an interesting look at the mythos of Santa Claus, especially in the end when they show how he delivers all the presents in one night. So I thought it was cool, and J.K. Simmons is great in it. So I just really enjoyed the movie. It's not, an Oscar-worthy film. It's not something that they knocked it out of the park. It's a 10 out of 10 standing ovation type movie, but it was enjoyable. And so that's why it made my list of favorite movies. Next on my list of favorite movies of 2024 is Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. Now, again, people have criticized this movie because they don't like girl bosses, which they say the main character in this is. They have other kinds of complaints. But again, I'm not super steeped in Lord of the Rings lore, so a lot of the complaints that they had didn't land with me. I just thought it was a well done movie on its own and that the performances were fantastic. It gave us a little bit of lore about one of the most iconic locations in, the Peter Jackson films, and I thought it made sense. I liked the girl boss character. I thought the animation was great. I just really liked this film, so I would say check it out. The next movie on my list of favorite movies of 2024 is Godzilla X Kong. Now, I did a standalone review video for this movie, so you can check that out. I thought this was the best of the recent Godzilla slash Kong movies that they made. This one I thought really had a more cohesive plot, a more thought-provoking plot, and I just really liked it. Kong comes off as almost a human character in this movie, which was great. So I really liked it. I can't say that I didn't have questions when it was over. I was like, well, they didn't really explain why that happened that way. But overall, I thought it was an entertaining movie, and I liked it better than the previous couple of MonsterVerse movies. So I would recommend it. Plus, they used a Kiss song in the movie, and that, of course, always gets it extra points. Okay, so the last movie on my list of my favorite movies of the year is Conclave. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Barry, this is not a genre film. This is not a sci-fi, horror, monster movie, fantasy type film. Why are you including it in a video on this channel, which is about all of those things? Well, it's just because it's a really, really fantastic movie that I really liked, and there was no way I was leaving it off this list. You see, though I be today a crazy atheist, I grew up Catholic. I grew up very Catholic. I went to a Catholic school for high school. In elementary and junior high, I went to regular schools, public schools, but I attended catechism every Saturday when I was little, and then it was on a weeknight when I was older. And that's, CCD. It's religious education, an hour a week, I guess it was. At one point, I was taught this class by my own mother, who taught it for years and had me in her class, which met at my house, which was crazy. I went on religious retreats. When I was in high school, I received all the sacraments of Catholicism up through marriage and just generally lived a religious life. At Easter time, the period approaching Easter was called Lent, and my mother would literally put a makeshift altar in our house and have my brother and I say prayers every night during Lent, and we would also be required to give up something for Lent. So, short story long, I grew up very Catholic. For a period of time, I was very interested in the papacy of John Paul II. He was a particular hero of mine after I did a report on him in school. My grandfather's doctor, his primary care physician, was someone that had known Pope John Paul II back when he was Karol Wojtyla in Poland. They hid from the Nazis together. I, at one point, was drawing my own little comic book about the Pope going to space and solving like wars and other conflicts on different planets. It was kind of like a Lost in Space meets Pope John Paul II, where he accidentally launches himself and two of his aides in a space shuttle when he was just trying to, perform a blessing. And then he can't figure out how to get back home, but he just keeps going from planet to planet, solving little conflict. Anyway, it was called The Pope in Space. Anyway, I grew up very Catholic. So, and very interested in the papacy and the hierarchy with the church and all that stuff. So, for me, when I saw the trailer for this movie, I knew I had to see it. Even though I'm not of the faith anymore, this stuff is in my blood, this knowledge of how the church operates and the various clergy positions and what goes into deciding a pope is all stuff that I'm familiar with and which is hardwired into me just as factual information. So I found the premise of the film from the first trailer to be very intriguing, and I knew I had to see it. And, throw into that, right, Ray Fiennes, John Lithgow, and Stanley Tucci. How are you not seeing this movie? So I absolutely loved it. It was a very stark look at the highest level of the Catholic Church and the politics that are there, the hardline politics, the very much outcome determining politics. There has long been in the Catholic Church a conflict between the more progressive elements and the more conservative elements. And every now and then the church comes out with reforms. The most recent huge one was Vatican II in the 60s, where all the cardinals met, and I think the Pope at the time, and they changed a lot of church policy. Recently, they went through a huge change in how the Catholic Mass is said. So the Mass that I used to be able to say by rote, and probably still can, is now not the same Mass because they make changes. Anyway, it's all very political. And so this was a political intrigue film mixed in with one of the most powerful entities on the planet, the Catholic Church, that over 1 billion people are adherents of. And I thought it was just very intriguing to see all the machinations between the various characters in the film with their various agendas and the various foibles that the various candidates for the papacy had that ended up disqualifying them, and the different entrenched positions of the various factions that either wanted a particular candidate or didn't want a particular candidate to assume the papacy. And throughout the film, a couple of different mysteries about a couple of different things are explored and ultimately solved. And the ending, which is very controversial, and it's understandably controversial, the ending is a huge twist, and it's just like jaw dropping if you're someone that understands the Catholic Church and the catechism of the Catholic Church. So it just blew me away. And all of that together just made this a super excellent film. I think it's really going to be something to see what awards it wins come award season for this year's movies. Definitely acting. I can't see them not getting acting awards. So we'll see what other ones they get. The one thing I will say about it that's not exactly a positive is that at some moments, I thought that maybe they tried a little too hard to work modern day civilian or lay people politics into the story, or a commentary on same, by having, for example, some of the people from the more liberal faction of the Catholic Church, the characters that were portraying those people, sort of chew the scenery a little bit, talking about their more liberal positions versus those of the conservative, and vice versa, actually. And so it came off in those moments as a little bit on the nose and a little bit heavy-handed, like they were trying to have a message, a political message, rather than just tell the story of two equally opposed and equally powerful political factions. They kind of were leaning in one direction, kind of, with the message. So I didn't love that because it was in a film that otherwise, didn't take you out of it, whereas this kind of jolted me out of it a little bit. But it was minor and it didn't really affect the film all that much. So, again, I came away totally mind blown by this movie. I just thought it was fantastic. And that's why I saved it for last, because I just knew I was going to ramble on about it. So, anyway, see Conclave if you can. It's really, really good. Now, that was 10 movies from 2024 that were not my favorite, and 10 movies from 2024 that were my favorite movies. You might notice a couple of glaring omissions from the list of favorite movies that people might be surprised to find are not on someone's list of favorite movies of the year. I'm talking about Wicked and Nosferatu. So I wanted to give them both a special mention in my list of favorite movies, because these are not movies that I didn't like, but I couldn't in good conscience put them on my list of my favorite movies of the year because I thought they were both kind of mediocre, but at the same time, massive achievements in cinema. Wicked has great performances from the two lead actresses. The singing and the choreography and everything is just really great in this film. I did a standalone video for it, a review video, so you can check that out. But I didn't like the plot so much. And I know it's from the musical, which is from the books. Again, never read them, never saw the play. But, so I'm not comparing it. I can't compare it. I just didn't think the plot was all that great. I didn't think it had, they tried to have emotional beats. It was based on their relationship and how much these characters cared for each other or didn't care for each other and all of that. But it just sort of came across kind of flat to me until the end, and the big number at the end, which was great. But I didn't love it. And, it's a part one. So I guess as a setup for the part two, you could say, okay, it did its job, but it just, I don't know, it came off as weak sauce to me. So I'm going to have to see the second one, the second part, and maybe reevaluate the story as a whole as like a 4-hour or 5-hour thing. But for the most part, I wasn't wowed by Wicked. Wowed by the singing and the choreography. That stuff was all on point. and really great, but as a film, I was disappointed in it. And I don't know if that's fair because my expectations are not the fault of the filmmakers, but I just found it to be a letdown based on what I thought it was going to be from the trailer and what I thought they were going to do with these actors in these roles, but they ultimately really didn't. So I was just let down by it. And so I couldn't put it on my list of least favorite movies because I enjoyed watching it, but I had to talk about it, and I couldn't put it in my favorite movies for the reasons I said. And I had to talk about it because it's one of the biggest movies of the year. It's probably going to win a bunch of awards, but I also couldn't put it on my list of favorite movies, so there you go. And I have similar feelings about Nosferatu. Now, there again, great performances. Lily Rose Depp is excellent in it. She makes the movie super creepy when it needs to be, and I really like that. Bill Skarsgård is excellent as the Nosferatu character. His voice is so crazy in this, and his accent, it's like I wouldn't have believed it was him if I didn't know it was him. The appearance of the character, when you get to see it, is pretty scary, pretty gross, and impactful in that way. Kind of a departure from the traditional Nosferatu appearance, which kind of bugged me, but, beastly for sure, and I thought that all worked. Willem Dafoe is excellent in this movie, and it's funny because he played a character that was supposed to be actual Nosferatu playing himself in a movie about himself
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
a couple of years ago in a movie called Shadow of the Vampire. So it's kind of weird that he's in this. But anyway, I thought he was really good in it. I just wasn't wowed by it. And part of that isn't really fair to the movie because what Nosferatu is from the beginning is a ripoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, which, I mean, it was even ruled that in a court of law. So, obviously, I had seen this story before when I saw Bram Stoker's Dracula 30 years ago. So, it was kind of anticlimactic in that way because I knew what the basic story beats were. They just changed the names. So, it was a little boring in that way. And, they left stuff in it that didn't need to be in it. It's not terribly long. It's 2 hours and 4 minutes, but it could have been an hour and 45. And I thought if it were tighter, it would have been, better. They had stuff in it that didn't need to be in it. One of the things they had in it that didn't need to be in it was the part of the story where, the Count is on the boat making his way from his country to England. And, it is a chapter in Bram Stoker's Dracula, so it's part of the story. But, for example, if I'm not mistaken, in the film Bram Stoker's Dracula, they showed his journey to London in a montage. Like there's a map and they literally show like a boat or a train or both making the various legs of the journey in like 2 minutes. In this, they spent, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes with the character on the boat and killing the people on the boat. And it's like, yeah, we know he's a vampire. Like, and I saw Last Voyage of the Demeter. I saw this movie. So I thought they should have left that out. And they kind of drag the story out to where he finally arrives in London. It takes forever. And there's these constant scenes of he's coming, he's going to be here, he's coming. And, you just sort of see the same scene over and over again with Lily Rose Depp's character going through her fits and having her nightmares. And it's like, well, how many times are they going to show the same scene? So I was disappointed with it. But I had to talk about it because it's one of the biggest films of the year. And again, as with the case of Wicked, it's a massive cinematic achievement. The cinematography is fantastic in this movie. They, repeated some of the things that were in the Bram Stoker's Dracula movie, but again, that's because it's in the book. And I just thought they did a great job creating atmosphere and spookiness, and the performances were fantastic. Nicholas Hoult does a great job. And by the way, he was also in Renfield, where he plays Renfield last year. So another vampire movie. Anyway, so I thought all that stuff was great, but it just had stuff in it that didn't need to be in it. They show his whole journey to the castle and they dragged that out. That wasn't done in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I don't know how dragged out it is in the book. I'm a bit of a Philistine. I've not read it, but I didn't think his trip to the actual castle needed to be as long as it was and as detailed as it was. They could have taken that out and the movie wouldn't have dragged to the extent that it did if they had taken stuff like that and the other stuff I've mentioned out of it. But again, massive cinematic achievement. It's going to win a bunch of awards and deservedly so. I just couldn't say that I was super fond of it, but I also couldn't leave it off my discussion of my favorite and least favorite films of the year because it would have been like, the elephant in the room if I had left it out, and the same for Wicked. But that is it. Those are my 10 most favorite and least favorite films of 2024. Absolutely let me know what you think of any one or all of these movies in the comments. You can check out the videos that I've made on these various films, whether they be long or short. Some of them I didn't touch at all in video form, but most of them I did. Those are all on the channel under my movie reviews tab, at least they should be. But for now, I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.